Good evening, everyone. My name is Adrianette Ciccone, and I have the privilege of introducing my friend and colleague and fellow Cornell alumni, Terrence Evans, who will be introducing Justice Eileen Moore, and we will be getting on with our program. This evening, we are taking a special look at the experience of African Americans in the military, and we're very excited about all of our panelists. They all have a very diverse background. And Terrence, who we love, is super amazing. He is a partner at Dwayne Morris, who is hosting our webinar this evening and will be providing MCLE credit. Terrence has done up to maybe 100 programs in the past year, and I'm still amazed that he has the time to work as many hours as he does, do as many racial justice programs as he does, and is just super actively involved in the community. So with that said, Terrence, take it away.
Thank you so much, Adrianette, and thanks for the great work you do on behalf of our California Lawyers Association Racial Justice Committee. Hello, everyone. I'm Terrence Evans, and as Adrianette mentioned, I'm a partner at Dwayne Morris, where I also serve as one of the team leaders of our banking and financial services practice. I also have the great honor of being the chair of the litigation section of the California Lawyers Association, vice president of the Charles Houston Bar Association, and Deputy Director of Region 9 of the National Bar Association. Before we begin, we want to thank a few of our co-sponsors for making this event possible. I want to thank my law firm and our diversity and inclusion program under the leadership of Joe West for sponsoring amazing programs like this. I want to thank the California Lawyers Association Racial Justice Committee and also the litigation section for their support. We want to thank the Los Angeles County Bar Association for supporting this program. We also want to thank the Charles Houston Bar Association, the California Association of Black Lawyers, and Region 9 of the National Bar Association for coming together to make this incredible event possible. As Adrianette mentioned, this program is honoring Black military veterans, and we're so grateful for all of those who you will be hearing from shortly. For those of you who would like to get elimination of bias credit, that is available through this program. You will see during the program a number of questions pop up on your screen. Please respond to those questions during the program. It's just the State Bar's way of making sure that you're paying attention so that you can get that valuable MCLE credit. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our moderator for this evening, the amazing Justice Eileen Moore from the California Court of Appeal. Justice Moore is a true believer in diversity and inclusion and has participated in numerous of these programs for the California Lawyers Association. She has been honored multiple times, including receiving the Distinguished Alumni of the Year Award from the University of California, Irvine. She's also been honored for her military service and her service to veterans, both nationally and locally. Without further ado, I would like to hand the mic over to our amazing Justice Eileen Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence, and thank the California Lawyers Association Racial Justice Committee, brilliantly led by Adrianette Ciccone. Special thanks to Terrence's law firm, Dwayne Morris. I would like to briefly explain why I am here tonight. It is my hope and desire that never again will another veteran be treated in the same despicable manner many of our Vietnam vets were. I am a life member of Vietnam Veterans of America. The motto of VVA is, never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. Trying to take that motto as a call for action, in 2008, I prevailed upon the powers that be in California courts to have a committee devoted to veterans and military families who appear in California's 600 or so state courthouses. I have chaired that group since its inception. People routinely say to a veteran, "Thank you for your service," not really knowing what that service entailed. It is our hope that tonight you will learn something about what service meant and means for these African American patriots. There are 18 million veterans in the United States. 1.8 million of them are in California, and 8.6% of veterans are African American. Before we meet our guests, I want to say a few words about African Americans in the military. Since pre-revolutionary times and during all of America's wars, African Americans have defended America, but also enduring indignities and dangers that non-Blacks did not have to face. Bit by bit, after each war, Blacks improved their circumstances at home. During World War I, 400,000 Black Americans served. Black clergy led bond drives contributing $250 million from the African American community. In Europe, Black soldiers fought alongside French troops as equals and comrades, while the United States military remained segregated. At US bases, Blacks were assigned menial jobs. Many African American soldiers recommended for medals had those recommendations somehow lost and never received them. When they came home after World War I, they expected the nation to be grateful for their displays of patriotism. Instead, they faced a nation that wanted to return to normalcy. The Ku Klux Klan was revived. Blacks faced one bloody race riot after another, finding their most prosperous communities targeted: Washington, D.C., the Greenwood neighborhood of Oklahoma, Rosewood, Florida, and many other places. Despite the country's lack of appreciation, almost 1 million African Americans served during World War II. Defeating Nazi persecution, they realized the hypocrisy of segregation in the United States as they watched German and Italian prisoners of war have more rights than they did. During the war, Langston Hughes penned a poem that included this stanza: "You tell me that Hitler is a mighty bad man. I guess he took lessons from the Ku Klux Klan." The Black veterans who came back from World War II had improvements on their minds. Many of them were at the center of the civil rights movement during the post-war decades, such as Ralph Abernathy, Medgar Evers, and Oliver Brown, the named plaintiff in Brown versus Board of Education. Those Black World War II vets were very active, capturing the ear of President Harry Truman, also a veteran. Very shortly after being the first president to address the NAACP, Truman appointed Frederick Vinson to the Supreme Court. Vinson wrote the opinion striking down restrictive covenants in the 1948 case Shelley versus Kramer. Truman was said to often remark on the horror met by Black veteran Isaac Woodard, still in his Army uniform a few hours after his discharge and on his way home. He was on a bus when he asked the bus driver if there would be time to relieve himself at the next stop. The bus driver was so incensed at the request that he flagged down a police car. The chief of police in Batesville, South Carolina, beat Woodard so hard his billy club broke in Woodard's eye socket, blinding him for life. Truman's Executive Order 9981 abolished discrimination in the armed forces in 1948. Now remember that Jackie Robinson's court-martial in 1942 was the result of his objecting to going to the back of the bus, and that segregated bus was on base. But it took until 1954 to finally accomplish desegregation in the military. I assume when it finally happened that year, it had something to do with the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education desegregation decision. During the Vietnam War, the government was demanding more and more men to be drafted. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara lowered the aptitude standards to permit mentally challenged men in the military. All of the 354,000 men in the program from 1965 to 1971 were from poverty-encrusted backgrounds. While the typical recruit was a Caucasian high school dropout, African Americans comprised a large percentage of what was called the New Standards recruit. Most were sent directly to combat. Inferior job assignments for Black service members continued long after desegregation. In Chappelle versus Wallace, the United States Supreme Court said in 1983 about a lawsuit brought by 5 Black men against their superior officers for assigning them to undesirable jobs due to their race, that the men could not recover damages for the alleged constitutional violations by the officers. A 1987 Yale Law Review article opined that discrimination in assignments did not disappear after Chappelle. It just went underground. Blacks in the military continue to be treated differently. As recently as December 2020, just a few months ago, the Inspector General of the Air Force issued an independent racial disparity review. Its survey revealed that it was of particular concern that approximately 50% of Black officer, enlisted, and civilian respondents have either experienced or witnessed racial discrimination by other Department of Air Force members. I could go on, but it will probably be better to hear what our guests have to say. All of them have served in some branch of the service, and they are here to tell you about their experiences. After each has made a self-introduction, I'm going to ask some questions. The service of these veterans spans from 1969 to present day. Let's begin with Jim Maddox, who went to Vietnam as a member of the United States Army in 1969, 15 years after desegregation of the military was finally accomplished, and 5 years after the Civil Rights Act. Jim, please take a few minutes and tell us about yourself and your experience as an African American in the military.
Thank you, Justice Moore. You stole some of my thunder. I want to file I don't know what we call it, you call it in the law, but I'm just going to file a complaint because you are the personification of what Vietnam Veterans of America are. And that founding principle for everyone is never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. And Justice Moore is the personification of that. So anyway, you stole my thunder a little bit on that, and I will stop. My name is Jim Maddox. I grew up in Norwalk, Connecticut, Fairfield County. Very wealthy county, but the town I grew up in was a working class town. I was drafted. One of the questions that the justice put was, what drew you to the military? My friends and neighbors sent me a letter. When the draft board worked, they used to send a letter to your house saying, greetings from your friends and neighbors. I was still looking for them, but I'm now an old guy, so they're probably long gone. I was in the Army from June of 1969 to January of 1972. I spent 21 months. I was in Vietnam from April of 1970 through January of 1972. And I was an intelligence analyst. And right now I live in Pasadena, California. And I was for 25 plus years a commercial insurance underwriter specializing in cyber liability, medical device manufacturers, and errors and omissions coverage for software and hardware developers. 5 years ago, I decided that I wanted, at the behest of a number of people, to go back and get a MSW, a Master of Social Work. And so now I am a social worker focused on veterans, older adults, victims and survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual assault. And I am a policy guy, I don't want to be a clinician, because I think that in order to affect policy, you need to have a clinical lens. And then the last thing the justice asked was anything that people would like to know about you, something personal. Two things. I was fortunate. My father is my standard, my gold standard of behavior. He was a kind man. And I try to meet that standard, but I fall short. So I have to hit my knees and go, Billum, I tried, but I didn't make it today. The other one is that I was fortunate enough to have an uncle who was an 8th grade high school. He got out of high school in 8th grade, or he had to go work in 8th grade. And he was an entrepreneur, and he had an amazing eye to see opportunities. And one of the things that he purportedly said to adults, and I never heard him say it, but it was, if a man's job don't get him up, I won't either. And I have always kind of worked on that standard. So Bill Maddox's standards and James Chapman's work ethic.
Thank you, James. And next will be Ernest Graves, who began his experience with the Navy in 1980. Mr. Graves?
Yes, thank you, Yolanda. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight, and I didn't think anybody was interested in anything about my military service, but not true. I am from the great state of Virginia. My family has been there since the British were there, about 400 years, and every generation of my family has been a part of the military, and it was my turn. And because of a lack of an opportunity to go to college, the Navy was my other option. And my dad had sort of planted the seed a long time ago about a military opportunity. And it's where I ended up at. And wonderful opportunity to learn a skill, learn a trade, and get to travel and be left with lifelong memories. This photograph's of me when I was, I think, 20 years old in 1980. And nevertheless, I spent my years working in anti-submarine warfare. I was fortunate enough to go work for the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C., which was a real opportunity. And I went on to a reservist position. And I called it quits in about 1990. I worked for a large telecommunications company, AT&T, and I've had a wonderful career, only because of my military background. What would someone want to know about me? I don't know. You know, I'm a historian, amateur historian. I love to cook. I love people. I love to travel. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the military, getting to meet people and travel different places. And I'm grateful for my service. The lifestyle I live is because of my military service. This gentleman in the photograph right there is my great uncle, Ernest Johnson. He was a veteran of World War II. He told me stories about his interaction with the German soldiers, the Russian soldiers when they met in Berlin, and how the Germans were the Russian, troops were nicer to him than the white American troops were. And I found that quite interesting. And he went on to explain to me the difference between yellow Russians and white Russians. Red Russians, white Russians, and yellow Russians, because of his experience. But that's basically me in a nutshell. I guess you might say. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have served my country, despite the things that I had to deal with as far as race is concerned. And thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. Now we have Dr. James Starks, a proud Marine who went into the military in 1982.
Good evening, everyone. It's a distinct pleasure to be here. And I want to especially thank Justice Moore for the invitation to participate in this particularly important discussion. My name is James Starks, and I am from Ferguson, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. A bit of context here. In 1982, when I graduated high school, I did not understand the economics or politics of the time, but did recognize the bleak environment around me relating to the upward mobility of African Americans. I came from a working class family. Both parents worked in my home, but didn't recognize the value of a college education. Rather, they were focused on the importance of trying to coexist and survive in a country that viewed African Americans as second-class citizens. The 1980s gave birth to the crack cocaine epidemic era. And at that time, 1982 was one of the highest ever for unemployment. As a Black, unemployment was at or just below twice that of whites at that time. As a young African American, I felt that pressure during my senior year in high school. Thus, joining the Marine Corps was the best option for me, and it would turn out to be the best decision of my life. It gave me a fighting chance at processing and understanding how to successfully navigate life in America. It would also provide me the opportunity to get a college education. That, and of course, the chance to wear that awesome uniform of the Marine Corps. I enlisted in August of 1982 after a friend talked me into it and then backed out. I didn't, largely because my grandfather taught me a man keeps his word. Thus, I followed through and would go on to serve 28 years on active duty, retiring in 2010 as a Master Gunnery Sergeant, E9. I served as a food service specialist, cook for most people who understand the military, as a drill instructor, and as a logistics chief during my tenure. My wife and I live in a beautiful downtown San Diego. Absolutely love it. I've been essentially retired since 2010. But to stay active, I operate a small consulting business with my wife, specializing in organizational leadership issues, challenges for small and medium-sized business. Something personal. This is kind of hard, but I found something very interesting. My wife and I in 2019 traveled for 3 months throughout Europe, visiting 8 countries in total. We had the honor and the opportunity to visit Normandy, France during the 75th anniversary of D-Day. I actually stood and walked on both Omaha, and Utah beachfronts, the very beaches that nearly 2,000 African-American troops had landed and fought alongside their comrades, a part of American history that has been essentially ignored in my view. However, the French did not, as the Memorial Museum just off of Omaha Beach affectionately describes several African-Americans in their service, which made me enormously proud. Lastly, we also visited the town of Belleau, France, where one of the Marine Corps' most famous battles took place in June of 1918, the Battle of Belleau Wood. My wife and I will walk the battle space while also paying our respects to those Marines who paved the way for me and others who lay rest there. We also visited and drank from one of the only available fresh water points during the war that still operates today. It was a very solemn and humbling experience for me. I'm essentially honored to be here. I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Starks. Now there's Chloe Woods, who joined the Air Force in 2016.
Hello, thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this panel. I am originally from St. Louis. I attended Columbia University for undergrad and Washington University in St. Louis for law school. I came to the military probably a little bit different than others, and people always are surprised that I came in after attaining my law degree. So I came in through the JAG program. I at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Prior to that, I'd done some summers with the Army JAG Corps at in Fayetteville at oh gosh, I'm losing my mind. What's the base? Fort Bragg. There we go. So I spent summer there at Fort Bragg with the Army. To commissioning in as a first lieutenant in 2016. I actually was only in the Air Force for a year. I came in and came out in August 2017, but still opportunity here. So something personal about me, I recently left my role as in employment and bankruptcy counsel at a law firm to start a cannabis-based business. And so I am working on that because in Arizona, cannabis just became recreationally legal. And so I'm getting into the entrepreneurship side of things and supply chain, logistics and transportation for the business moving cannabis drugs.
Thank you, Chloe. And last but not least is Major Alexis Carter, who is still serving. Major Carter?
Yes, good evening. My name's Alexis Carter. Most days out of the month, I'm just Alexis Carter Esquire, but a few days out of the month, I'm on reserve duty and I'm Major Alexis Carter. Today is one of those days. I came in kind of similar to Chloe, went through college, went through law school, and I was a direct commissionee into the Army JAG Corps and spent 7 years on active duty from 2010 to 2017. Prior to that, I was a public defender, home in Orlando, Florida, and had various assignments while on active duty, Did a deployment to Afghanistan in 2014 in support of Operation Enduring Freedom as they transitioned into Operation Resolute Support. And then in 2017, I got off of active duty and joined the reserves and returned home to Orlando, Florida, where I started my own practice. I also teach as an adjunct law professor at Florida A&M University College of Law and sit on the Orlando Mayor's Veterans Advisory Council. What drew me to the Army? You know, unlike some others, I don't have any military experience in my background or family. I'm a first generation American. My mother's from Jamaica. My father's from Panama. So, you know, when I brought up the idea that I was joining the military, you know, my mom was like, military? Oh, why I talk about military? You know, it didn't really, you know, sink into her that, you know, her baby boy was going to be, you know, heading off. But I wanted to be part of something greater, you know, than myself. And I think for a lot of people that join, that's the attraction. You know, you can join sports teams, you can join clubs, you can join, you know, fraternal organizations, but something about wearing that patch with the stars facing forward and, you know, people from so many diverse backgrounds collectively coming together for, you know, the greater good of all. There is no other experience or feeling. Additionally, I wanted to practice law in a more dynamic way. You know, in the civilian world, the number one question that attorneys get is, well, what kind of lawyer are you? And in the JAG Corps, we get the phrase, we're a jack of all trades, right? So I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense attorney, I've done contract law, environmental law, international law. Plus, I know how to drop out of planes, load weapons, and kill you. So, I mean, it doesn't get too much better than that. Something that people will probably like to know about me. I love to eat. It's one of my favorite things. Probably the reason why I'm still in the military, so I can make sure I stay, you know, physically fit and run and work out, because Lord knows if it wasn't for PT, you know, how much I would weigh right now. So that's about it.
Thank you. So would any of you like to say a few words about what is or was the best part of the military service for you?
I could chime in on that. I think the best part of military service, oh, there it is right there. So that's me in Afghanistan circa 2014. And the best that I'm with my my linguist. She is a Afghan woman who immigrated to the US and got asylum and was able to come back with us on a deployment and be our linguist. I was involved in a few counterintelligence operations. Oh, by the way, everything that I'm saying tonight is the views of Alexis Carter alone and does not represent the Department of Defense, Department of the Army, or any of its branches or sister services. That's me with the Orange County Mayor. It was Veterans Day, and I gave a speech to the community regarding veterans and their influence in the community. So, you know, the two things that have been great about the military experience is, one, getting to see our society through the lens of other cultures. I think, you know, here in the US, we get inundated with, you know, the messaging that we see from film and media and things of that nature. But, you know, when you're on the other side and you get to talk to people and, you know, see how others view you, it kind of gives you another layer, another perspective on, you know, how to view yourself to a certain extent. And then just coming back home and being able to share that experience with, you know, friends and family and locals who, you know, like in Orlando, we're known for tourism. We're not a big military town, but I can, you know, relay those experiences to members of my community. So those have been the greatest experiences while serving.
Major, just for clarification, that was Orange County, Florida?
Correct. The real Orange County.
Anybody else?
I actually had a response here. I think in broad terms, the military provided stability and better opportunities for success for me personally. It offered me a chance to meet and integrate and learn from like-minded people, regardless of race, which I think is significant. And also, obviously, the obvious, in some cases, for most people, it provided me an opportunity to travel domestically and internationally. Additionally, being a drill instructor, which we're solely responsible for training and making of Marines, was one of the best individualized experiences for me. It gave me an opportunity to dispel perceptions correlated with stigmas about African Americans who are also coincidentally food service Marines, and they're correlated in the correlations with prestige and aptitude. For most Marines, they'll never forget their drill instructors. For example, during graduation week, it was customary for drill instructors to bring photos that depicted their military occupational specialty. This was to allow the recruits to see them in a different light as soon to be lifelong brothers and sisters. Mine, of course, were of pastries and ceremonial cakes, as I was a baker. In my view, this simple act and eventual conversations that followed did a lot to dispel the assigned stigmas of African Americans who were also food service Marines in the eyes of newly indoctrinated Marines. Overall, the honor to lead others, regardless of who they were or what they looked like at home and at war, and not to lose not one Marine, to ensure that equal opportunity was provided to all to support and the safety and upward mobility of those whom I was responsible for, was in part the greatest honor of my life.
Did any of you experience or observe racial discrimination in the military, and or did you act any certain way to avoid or challenge discrimination?
You know, I want to say that after our initial conversation, Judge Moore, I had done a lot of thinking about that conversation. And in particular, the thing that I come up with is that coming from the South, I believe I've been conditioned to certain things. And in going into the military, the conditioning allowed me to sometimes not see things for what they really were, unless it was blatant with regards to race and racial injustice in the military. But I will say that the things that I experienced were dealt with by leadership in what I thought was pretty quick and swift, to be honest. It was known in boot camp that they were not going to tolerate race. They were not going to tolerate people being called names, such as the N-word, and they made good on their promise. The other things you see, I saw was subtle things such as promotions and evaluations, which help you promotions. Those are the things that I think I saw that were probably most prevalent in my career, for the most part.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. Anyone else?
I can talk. Go ahead. Go ahead, Chloe.
So my experience really, I felt, was not ideal. It was part of what set in motion me being separated after only a year. I had more subtle, not like very blatant name calling, but more subtle things that were occurring. And it was, you know, I was called elitist. I was called a lot of things as a JAG. So most of the backlash that I received was this, you know, I was the only Black female, or the only Black person actually coming in to officer training school as a member of the JAG Corps. And often in my flight, it was, I'd say something and then it was just like, oh, you know, so I didn't know if it was what part of the intersectionality it is. Is it me being a woman? Is it me being a Black woman? Is it just, oh, I don't want to listen to this person because, you know, they're calling me a narc because I'm a JAG, like she's a narc. So a lot of it was very much kind of, I thought, subtle and being told that I'm elitist or sedity or uppity or something like that. And think those are those words, those dog whistle words that people use when you're speaking about Black people and Black women in particular, or even to say someone is like aggressive or to say someone is militant. So, you know, so those things, like those are the words that were used to describe me. And I'm like, are you not comfortable with a woman in leadership? Are you not comfortable that you're going to have to take orders from me? And I think some of that was true. There were people, there was, you know, white men that said they would not listen to what I had to say. I didn't have any military background. They were coming in from having been enlisted, and now they're transitioning over to being a commissioned officer. So I think there was a little bit of resentment also with me having seniority or rank over people who had experience really as well, and knew like the military culture a lot more than I did. So can't say specifically that it was based on race, can't say specifically that it was based on gender, or specifically that it was based on me being a JAG, but I think all of those things had something to do with it when you look at the fact that in 2016, when I was coming in, I would have been the 13th Black female, like full-time in the JAG Corps, in the Air Force JAG Corps. So like 13 of us in 2016, I think, you know, there's a reason for that. There's definitely qualified Black female attorneys, but for whatever reason, they're not staying, they're not being, you know, recruited and attracted, retained by the Air Force at this point.
Anyone else?
Yeah, and to echo Chloe's sentiment, there are very few Black female attorneys in the Air Force JAG. In fact, I know half of them, and that should not be that way. But you know, in terms of personal racial experiences, you know, I think in our generation, and I mean our generation, I refer to Chloe and myself, is that it's not as blatant. You know, it's the microaggressions and the commentary, you know, at the water coolers, so to speak. But to kind of put things into context, and I would like to share with you an experience from our current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who was a former 4-star general. And back in 1995, he was the first Black operations officer at Fort Bragg, the first in 1995. And I'm pretty sure many of you on this call can remember what you were doing in 1995. But for him to be the first at the 82nd Airborne Division, which is the Army's biggest division, he was the first Black operations officer there. And he shared that during his briefings with the commanding general, instead of doing it himself, he would delegate it to a white officer, because he felt that the white officer would be better received by the other staff members. So that's just an example of some of the things that, you know, military service members of color have had to experience and endure and pivot and adjust because of the certain spaces that they're in. And, you know, for me personally, as a JAG who had to advise commanders on, you know, good order and discipline and how to punish, if you will, or discipline soldiers for misconduct, I invariably noticed that, you know, when there was a white officer who, you know, popped hot for smoking marijuana or had a 1-day or 2-day AWOL versus a black soldier who did the same thing, you know, the punishment was different. And sometimes it's very hard to point to it as being race, because a lot of times the justification would be, oh, well, you know, this soldier also did such and such, or what they would find something else to kind of justify it. But invariably speaking, and the statistics show, service members of color face disproportionate punishment under Uniform Code of Military Justice than white service members.
Justice, I'd like to add something to both comments. I think that were as important as an example. I think I'm coming from an enlisted perspective. I grew up in the military from an enlisted perspective. So all of the things that the officers are talking about, I knew of, but also from an enlisted perspective who were underneath those officers who didn't see individuals who look like me. There was a lot of disparity in reference to those individuals who I could confide in reference. And I'll give one example in reference to common knowledge. There was a lieutenant colonel in a unit that I served with that everybody who was African-American knew was racist. It was open in I mean, I would even venture to say there's some people that I actually spoke to that knew that this individual was a racist and didn't like African-Americans. And I had to work for this individual. And it was a very stressful experience to try to navigate the waters of dealing with someone that you knew. And he confirmed those perceptions through his actions. I'll give you an instance. He attempted to use illegal covert tactics in order to give me a negative fitness report, which is a reporting a performance review. And that was a career stopper because it was actually a combat related fitness report. And I had to get the commanding officer involved. And luckily I had a good commanding officer that actually put a squelch to it. But ironically, the lieutenant colonel, though he lacked integrity and blatant violations of the UCMJ that were exposed, he faced no repercussions. In fact, 2 months after that, he got promoted to be a commanding officer. And 2 years after that, he became an 06 colonel. So dealing with issues and things that you see, even from a enlisted existentially, to see the officers that don't look like you, but also some of the things that were readily known that were never addressed, as an example.
Did any of, I don't know what experience you had before going in the military. This might be a generational thing of interacting with people of other races. If I had, when I went in the military, the city, I grew up in Philadelphia, and the city was largely segregated, even though I grew up in a poor area. But I did have one experience in Vietnam that resonates with me. When the wounded came in, they were taken from the helicopter directly to surgery most of the time. And then they would wake up in the tent with an American girl standing over them, and they'd be so happy, not sure where they were, but they were so, that wherever it was, they knew they were safe and they were happy to be alive, and they'd often reach out to touch us. And one Black soldier with tears in his eyes squeezed my hand and said, "You're my soul sister." I had no idea what that meant, but I knew it was somehow an important human connection. Did any of you have any kind of eye-opening cross-racial connection, or either good or bad, when you were serving in the military?
So I grew up in an inner city neighborhood, but I was never really there. Like, I've been in prep school my entire life. My parents have, I'm used to being literally the only Black person in the class. So I think that I was extremely comfortable around people of all races. And when I got into the military, I think, again, it was a bit of I feel like a class thing, because the people that I'd grown up with, the white kids I'd grown up with, we went to high school that was $26,000 a year. Like, that's not the experience of the people that I was with coming into officer training school. Like, that isn't, their background. My friends that are like from undergrad were my friends from law school that are kind of like working with congressmen, and I had worked on the Hill also before coming in. So I think for me, it just was, I'd grown up probably leaning more conservatively in like thoughts and feelings. And I guess like, we're gonna speak candidly. I know this is recorded, but to be candid, I think I felt like I was like one of the Black people. And then I got there, I was rejected. Like, interesting. I feel like I've always been I got somewhere where like none of that made a difference. I was not treated any better for having had that experience and been fortunate and privileged enough with the education that I had, with the social groups that I've been a part of, with the philanthropic work that I've been a part of. None of that really mattered. And so that was eye-opening for me, kind of in a negative way, but then also which kind of helped me in my awakening of just understanding that like those experiences won't save you. right? The letters behind your name won't save you. The Black Greek social organizations that you're a part of won't save you. Like it's more than that, and it's deeper than that.
That would be an eye opener. Anyone else? There have been many reports over the decades that Black soldiers deserving of medals did not receive them. In fact, going on right now in the news is coverage of one of the first Black members of the Army Special Forces, retired Colonel Paris Davis, who, while wounded himself from gunfire and a grenade, put his life at risk to rescue 2 other gravely injured soldiers. He was nominated for the nation's highest honor, the Medal of Honor, but his file vanished. The Army was ordered to submit new paperwork, but that mysteriously vanished as well. Do any of you have any information about medals or other awards being withheld from African American troops on the basis of their race?
Yes, I do, Judge Moore. My father's cousin received a Congressional Medal of Honor. His name Earl Guyton. He received that award he was 88 years old. He received a phone call from the Pentagon saying he had been awarded the medal and to come to Washington to receive it. And he was angry. He was not wanting to go to Washington to receive his award and the reason why is because he felt that he had been treated so wrong by the Marine Corps. And he carried this anger inside of himself ever since World War II. Well, finally, he talked to his children and his family, and they convinced him to go to Washington. And he did go, and he met with President Obama, and he received this award. And he's proudly displayed it. And he would actually let you touch it if you were to go visit him. And he left us a couple of years ago. He passed on, but an amazing man he was, yes. And his battalion was awarded this award because of something they had done that was heroic, and in the segregated Marine Corps from World War II.
And it took till he was 88 years old to receive it.
Yes, ma'am, 88 years old. Yes. And he's since given it to his elder son. He's passed on and no longer with us, but his memory will always be there. I mean, a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. That's pretty wild, you know?
Anyone else?
Justice, I think during my tenure, there was a clear perception of systemic issues regarding awards. And it was quiet conversations, I'm sure most of the panelists that can probably agree with this, that, amongst ourselves, African Americans, we quietly had these conversations about how we had to do more, twice as much in order to get the same recognition. But to bring that to the surface in order to try to bring that to someone's attention who had the authority to affect change was a bridge too far. And I can recall many a times of doing, things above and beyond that would normally rate recognition. And I was just told I was just doing my job, as opposed to individuals who were of another racial demographic, primarily white, doing half as much and getting twice the praise. But as far as specific issues or a particular medal or so on and so forth, there's nothing that I could bring up specifically, with the exceptions of it was just systemic. It was a thought process. It was a mentality that we all just accepted.
Anyone else? Yes, Jim.
All right, here we go. Medal of Honor. Jim Maddox does not do the Medal of Honor genuflect. And until Dory Miller is awarded his Medal of Honor, I will not do it. I get to the point that I throw out any newspaper or turn off the TV when anything comes up about the Medal of Honor. Done that. There were 22 Medal of Honor awarded during Vietnam. 16 of them were for blacks. 16 were posthumously. That means when I was in the Army, that was always known as they awarded the Medal of Honor the black way. The black way was you got killed. And so I'm a guy who read all of the citations for the Medal of Honor probably 25 years ago. And I got through about 35 of them. And by that time, I could tell you race, rank, and whether or not they died. But I read them all. I say to people, whenever you see a Medal of Honor, pull it up, and you find yourself a Vietnam veteran who is a combat veteran, who's an 11 Bravo or an 0300, and give it to him and say, have you ever seen anyone do this? And you probably will find out, yes, he has, and no, they didn't get anything for it. A Silver Star for Blacks is a downgraded Medal of Honor. A Bronze Star for Blacks is a downgraded Silver Star. A Good Conduct is a downgraded Bronze Star. So anyway, I have some very strong feelings about the Medal of Honor. And also just the way the awards are done. If we're going to talk about awards, and cut me off if I'm going off on a tangent, Judge Moore, because you know I can.
Well, I do know that, but I want the audience to know who Dory Miller is. They may not all know it. And as I recall, he was folding laundry for his commanding officer when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. He was on one of the ships and he threw down the laundry bag, and somebody had been killed next to him, and he picked up the gun and shot down, I think it was 3 or 5 planes. I can't remember.
You're not quite sure, somewhere between 5 and 7 aircraft. But he was and he brought the commanding officer for the Navy ship off the ship, and then went back on and started firing an anti-aircraft weapon that he had never been trained on. And if you read the citations for the Medal of Honor for the 5 people who received the Medal of Honor during Pearl Harbor, and then you take a look at his, and even the narrative is downplayed. So anyway, that's who Dory Miller is. And it's been a long time. And he is, for me, I'm a Vietnam vet. And so I tell you that because I got gray hair and I got a real bad attitude. And the Medal of Honor was awarded to Sergeant Major Connolly, who lives in Ventura, California, because he had an effective politician, Representative Bromley. Dory Miller is down in Waco, Texas, and his congresswoman is about as effective as running shorts on Mount Everest in a driving snowstorm. He has not been awarded. However, should be happy. Somehow a Navy ship an aircraft carrier is being named for Dory Miller. So aircraft carriers are generally named for presidents, and for the fact that he's getting an aircraft carrier named after him, Maddox should be happy. I don't know, maybe satiated a little bit, but that's who Dory Miller was.
Dory Miller was a cook too. I want to make just
he was a cook. He was a cook. Yes.
Thank you.
And anyway, that's enough of my rant.
On February 6, 2020, the Military Times reported that more than 1/3 of all active duty troops and more than half of minority service members say they have personally witnessed examples of white nationalism or ideologically driven racism within the ranks in recent months. Did any of you observe any activity that might be interpreted as extremist or white supremacy in the military? Swastikas, tattoos, nooses, stickers, decals, language?
Again, mine is dated. So when I was in Vietnam, or when I was in the military, in the Army, stars and bars were everywhere. And anyway.
Tell us about the sign that you saw when you were going to your first base, your new base.
Oh, Fayetteville. I wasn't for those of you who were stationed in Fayetteville, I still call the locals there the Fayette Cong. And coming into Fayetteville in 1969, there was a billboard and it said, "Welcome to Fayetteville. You are now in Klan country." And next to it was a guy in Klan regalia. That's,
And Dr. Starks, you had your hand raised, I think.
Yes, Justice. I served 1982 to 2010, and tattoos were common. Swastikas and Nazi memorabilia were often things that were noted in barracks rooms and wall lockers. I can even also remember a lot of Marines wanting to decorate their vehicle like the old TV series, The Dukes of Hazzard, which has the Confederate flag on top of it, and that was socially accepted. A few years before I retired, obviously the rules began to be more strict. Tattoos and were limited, to high visibility duties. You couldn't wear certain tattoos, or they couldn't be visible if you were in uniform. During my time, if you were a witness actually, engaging in those types of behaviors, and it was considered offensive, they basically just told them to correct the behavior. There was no repercussions. I think the only repercussion in reference to having a tattoo that was offensive was that they had the option of whether or not they covered it up, or they would be, recommended for process for discharge. The other things that as time progressed also, I began to have more courage in actually calling these types of behaviors and things out. And to my surprise, well, I guess not. I mean, obviously it's probably a natural reaction. The action became more stealthier. So, they became more covert. I and many senior leaders knew it was still happening, but it became harder to identify. And I remember feeling very afraid, because not knowing and understanding your enemy, which is what it was during our time, it's hard to kind of prepare. But, I developed a strong sense of responsibility toward improving the matters for African Americans, and openly began to report racist behavior. But I began to get stalked. I remember being threatened in reference to, if I see you out in town, so to speak. And that then created this need for us African Americans to create our own coalitions. And we actually created our own groups to be able to help respond and protect one another. Now, this is in the 1990s, 1980s. I mean, these are things that you can draw correlations to the Deep South during Jim Crow era. So I was eerily familiar. But yes, I saw many of them. And then, of course, the memorabilia started to change as well. And, as things get more stealthier, it becomes harder to track.
I have a question for Dr. Starks. You said that as time progressed, you became more emboldened or more outspoken. Was it more so the time, or more so as you rose in rank?
I think it's a little bit of both. Great question, by the way. I think it's a little bit of both. One, having the rank behind you, as you know, does give you a bit more of empowerment, and people listen. People were more apt to listen, because that you have the ability to command an audience. But the other thing in reference to the time, at that time, we had our first African-American Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. So that then gave it visibility that then created a platform to allow us to be able to engage.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Graves?
I recall once coming into work probably in 1981 or 1982 into my office. And at the time, we worked out of a small building. We did flight line duty. And nevertheless, I come into work one day and I find this application on one of the desks in the common area. And it was an application to join the KKK. And it was like, really? I look at this thing and I go, this can't be real. It's almost like a scene out of a movie, American Lampoon. And later on, one of my colleagues admitted to bringing the form in the office and leaving it on the desk. And he said, this is, he called it a joke and a prank, and we kind of laughed about it. And I literally forgot about it until our conversation the other day, Judge. And I often wonder, now I'm wondering, okay, what was behind that whole process of this application for the KKK. And then we're in Northern California. We're, next to San Jose, I mean, in Silicon Valley. This was not supposed to happen. I mean, it was literally, to me, it was a practical joke. But I look back and I go, that wasn't a joke. It was a little more serious than I took it at the time. But nothing ever happened as a result of it.
Ms. Woods, did you want to say something? No. And Major Carter, did you want to say something?
No.
Within the military, there is an equal opportunities process for reporting complaints of discrimination, but there have been reports that service members fear that reporting discrimination would likely backfire, and they would not be, they're not willing to take that chance. In fact, a Black Air Force airman stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base filed a complaint alleging discrimination after a white airman hung a noose near him. Later, someone drew a swastika in the bathroom. He found himself pushed out of the service after he made a report. Do you have any observations or comments about what happens when reports or complaints of discrimination are made in the military? Now, as I understand it, these EEO offices are run by non-military federal employees. And I'm wondering, do any of you have any knowledge about how easy or how hard it was to report discrimination and what repercussions there might have been?
So in the Army side, EEO is usually a green suitor. It's usually a E6 or above. Usually it's an E7.
So it is a member of the military then?
It is a member of the military. Now, the DoD civilians have their own EO channel or lane or representative who was a civilian, but in terms of the service members, that person is usually a service member as well, and usually is in the rank of E7 or above for the battalion and or the brigade size element. It's very difficult. And again, I'm only talking about, my perspective coming in, in 2010, it's very rare that, you would see something as blatant as an invitation to join the KKK in 2010, right? But, the microaggressions, the talk and the chatter is still there. The investigation ensues and, nothing comes of it. And then the retaliation is subtle, so that soldier or service member who reported it, on their evaluation report, they may get something that says, isn't a team player, doesn't work as well with others, things of that nature that will affect their possibility of promotion. Or maybe they get transferred out of that section to another section that isn't as, high speed. And so therefore, their evaluation doesn't weigh as much because now they're transferred out of this high speed section into a different section that, isn't as illustrious as the one that they're coming from. So it's the machine has its ways of continuing to adapt and evolve despite, the social consciousness and social awareness against racism and extremism. The system still has a way to grow and adapt.
I'd like to add here that from an enlisted, again, I think it's very interesting. It's great that we have officers and enlisted in this panel because I come from a very different perspective. I agree with everything that Major Carter is talking about, but I think early on for the Marine Corps, equal opportunity representative was a white position. It was one that had a direct line to the commanding officer. So therefore, from African Americans who may have had issues from an equal opportunity perspective, looked at that as a political process. So therefore, it was something that we shunned away from. We didn't really legitimize it in our minds until they started to diversify the individuals who actually bore that title. And even then, there was precaution in reference to how you actually engaged. I remember opportunities when I felt that I was, being discriminated, or issues that I would normally bring to an EEOC. I would find a African-American senior individual and I would go talk to them first. Then I would determine whether or not I would actually make the complaint or actually make it official. 99.9% of the time, I was either talked out of it or I didn't feel comfortable. So, as you get higher in rank, though, you have the ability to be able to massage the process, so to speak. So in other words, as an E8, E9, if I talk to the EOC or I bring somebody there to talk to them, if something were to occur, I know I can go talk to the senior enlisted advisor for that unit or the CO and make sure that the context was appropriately set. So therefore, there was some feeling of being able to massage the process that gave people more confidence in using it.
So I don't know if it was my lack of knowledge with military culture before coming in, or just the naivete to think that like, I can change the world, it's going to be great, equality for all. But I went to speak with EE and made a complaint while I was in officer training school, and everything went downhill from there. So I mean, that's the reason why I was only in for direct commissionee, so they could not remove me. There had to be a process, but subtle and swift. Everything that Major Carter spoke about I was put on my paperwork. I didn't score less than 96 on any PT test. Any single town over, they got written up and started a separation process for uniform violations. The uniform violation was I missed a button when I was getting dressed one morning. So, I mean, the things happened swiftly and they do retaliate, and then it's just kind of the process. So I personally would not have gone to EEO with my complaint in hindsight. I don't know. I don't think I knew whom to call. I think it would have been great if there were like a Black JAG association. I don't know if there are enough of us, it doesn't have to be branch specific, but maybe if there were one, so like have somebody to lean on and call and talk to and ask questions. But I just fresh out of law school thinking like, these are the laws that are on the books and the military is going to follow it because they're the government. So this is happening in my unit and let me go talk to somebody about it. Like that was a horrible idea.
So you had a problem of some kind. You went to the report the discrimination through the process, the EEO process. You prevailed, if I'm understanding this, you prevailed. And then one day you forgot to button something on your uniform. And the next thing you knew, they got rid of you and separated you from the Air Force.
A few more steps before that. So they did the investigation and as Major Carter mentioned, nothing came of it. So they put me in a room for about 4 hours while they conducted an investigation and talked to like everybody in my unit. So that then makes this confidential complaint that I have kind of go out the window, right? I don't know what was said. I wasn't there, but I think that you can kind of figure out who's missing for 4 hours when we're supposed to be doing things in training. Then the vice commandant came back and said nothing came from this, but they were going to move me anyway. So then they moved me to this other unit. But then when I got there, it was already like, I'm a troublemaker. So I got to this unit and everyone in this unit knew that I had made some type of complaint or that I had some type of problem, which resulted in me being moved there. So that was to start. Later, so again, nothing came from it. So it wasn't a I prevailed situation, but later there was a process that was started to separate me. And that process was based on unsuitability because I missed a button. I won, I prevailed in that process. And then they started again. And in fact, I will say I prevailed because the ADC was too busy to assist me. He's like, they're giving you an honorable, like, this just doesn't seem like military is for you. The evaluation said you're not a team player. Like, he's just like, I wouldn't fight it. If you fight it, they might take away the honorable. So that was his advice to me. So I actually represented myself. I wrote up all of like everything that was submitted. He looked it over and kind of signed his name on it, but he was too busy to be bothered to assist me and like me trying not get separated from the Air Force for missing buttons in my uniform.
So you made you went through the discrimination complaint process and almost immediately everybody in your unit knew about it. Did they respond or react in any way when they
I
knew about
mean,
it?
I think at that point it was kind of like a green light to like say things because it's like I'm not going to go. So there was a moment when we were all like kind of cleaning and they were playing music and they were asking me like the lyrics to rap songs.
I think you're frozen, Ms. Woods.
Out and asking me lyrics around, and they're like, "Oh, well, a country." They're like, "Don't feel left out," you know. Don't.
Yes, now we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Sorry. And then there was a the same night they put on like Sweet Home Alabama and some. It's like, well, don't go to EEO if you don't know the words. Like, you know, I think it just made it that much easier to then make complaints because if I say to make statements and the microaggressions, because if I then say something, now I look sensitive. Like now I'm going for every trivial thing.
Okay. You're frozen
Yeah,
again.
I
So I'm
made
gonna go on to the next
report.
question.
She's coming and going.
Pardon me? Last July, the Department of Defense announced that all photographs had to be removed from promotion and selection processes. This was done as a result of claims of institutional racial discrimination. Do you have any experience or information regarding racial bias in promotions or an opinion about the new policy? Jim?
It sounds good. And I guess I spent too much time as a commercial insurance guy that it doesn't ring true. And I forget the rank, but all field grade officers have to be approved by the Senate Armed Services Committee. They know who these people are. They know who people look like. To say that, okay, now we're going to take Major Carter's picture out of his file and he will be promoted to a lieutenant colonel. They know who he is. They know. So I think it sounds good, and it's eyewash for a public that doesn't know. And it's eyewash. I think it's eyewash.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would have to agree. Especially that when you're talking about service members and leadership, field grade and above, the community is so small. So if you review a picture, remove a picture, but you can tell by the assignment, oh, that person worked there in this position during this time period. I know exactly who that person is. Well, this person was rated by so-and-so. I know exactly, I can put 2 and 2 together and know who that person is. I like my picture. I'm handsome. I look good in my uniform. I want everybody to see, you know, how meticulous I am with my awards and how I put my stuff together. You know, that's what makes me me. So I personally don't like it. And I think it does soldiers who have that military presence and bearing about them. It does them a disservice, you know, who those soldiers who are, you know, taking care of business in terms of their image. And, you know, what about service members who went to historically Black colleges? You're not removing their education. So you can look at their education profile and say, oh, that's a HBCU. I mean, do you have white soldiers who go to HBCUs? Sure. But chances are that that soldier is going to be Black. So there's ways of still figuring, you know, getting around it. And if the military's intent is to attract, retain, train, and promote diverse populations, how are you doing that when you're so-called colorblind? You can't. You can't.
Anyone else?
I'll just say that, you know, trying to mitigate discrimination I know that it was a means of trying to, quote unquote, level the playing field, but I'm on board with Major Carter. There's so many other ways that people can actually find out things about you. And I agree. I look good in my uniform. It's a pride thing. It's an issue that you get opportunity to display. I think more diversification of the board selection teams is where the real meat of addressing the issue could be. I remember Admiral Mullen and his efforts and the pictures that are out there on social media. But one of the things that stuck out and from him being a white officer, four-star general, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, duck pick ducks. I mean, visualization, if you look like me, or if you went to where I went to, or if you know people that I know, you're going to get promoted. It has nothing to do with aptitude. It has nothing to do with your ability to excel, but has everything to do with segregation. And so diversifying those boards, I think, was probably more of the issue that needs to be addressed than stopping the someone from having a picture. My view.
So Justice Moore, we have a few questions in the Q&A. Would we want to start answering those questions that haven't been answered now, or do we have a little bit more content for this evening's program?
Well, we could go on for a long time. So why don't you go to the questions and see if we can address them.
Okay, so this is from Mr. Ellsworth Williams. He says, what do you say to service members who don't believe in racism, but only see one color? There seems to be an insurmountable difference in perception when it comes to racism. Don't all answer at the same time.
As a social worker, I'm not a clinical social worker, but I would say that is delusional, to say the least.
You mean the idea that the only color we see is green?
Yeah, no, that you see, you walk into a room and you can tell whether or not someone is tall, short, heavy, thin, black or white, or Asian. And to say that you don't say that is disingenuous. Doesn't say that you evaluate them on that basis, but to observe it is just, it's reality. And I find that borderline insulting to say that I don't see you. I can understand it if I walk into a room and they say, oh, I didn't know that you were that good looking. Okay, fine. But to say that I didn't know you were black, the old country saying, that dog don't hunt.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Carter.
I think that the misconception is the definition of racism, right? So I think when people of color, Black people, when we talk about racism, we're not so much talking about the one-on-one name calling or one-on-one, you don't like me because of the color of my skin. We've lived through that. We've been there, done that. We're talking about a system that promotes that allows that to continue to fester and foster. And that because of that, I am negatively impacted. I am marginalized. I don't receive the type of recognition, promotion that I deserve. So I think, what needs to be first figured out is, what does racism mean? And at least for me and most people that I talk to, if you called me a whatever, I wouldn't care as long as I still got paid, I still got promoted, I still got the same opportunities. It's whatever. You don't have to like me. I just don't want to work in a system that supports you not liking me, supports you discriminating against me. And in terms of my color, I want you to see my diversity. I want you to appreciate and value my background and be able to connect with me based off of my culture and experience. Obviously in the military, that's a little bit different. We do have the rank structure, and there is, customs and courtesy and different deference that's supposed to be given because of rank. So, you don't get too friendly with folks, but to the extent that someone is your peer, sure. Definitely see my color. Just don't treat me badly because of it.
Ms. Major, when you and I spoke on the phone, you had a really good idea. I asked you what the military might do to improve the racial situation. Do you remember what you said? If you don't, I'll remind you.
Remind me, please.
About mentoring?
Yeah, I think that there needs to be more, I guess, cross-cultural, cross-race mentoring. I think that, within the Black community in the military, you have folks that are willing to reach out and mentor. But I think it's also great to have mentorship that transcends or crosses over, and not just be so race centric in terms of your mentors. Seek out mentors and seek out mentees that are diverse from you. Was that it?
That was it.
Yeah, okay.
Greg, we have another really good question from Mr. Ellsworth Williams. Has any of the panelists involved or been involved in military sexual trauma? Is there a racial bias with regards to complaints?
So I was a prosecutor for the Army, and shout out to Mr. Ellsworth who's asking those questions. He's from Florida. Woohoo. But I would say in 2012, the military started really scrutinizing how they handled sexual assault and sexual trauma in the military. I don't know if too many remember, but there was a documentary that came out, I think it was called The Silent War. And
The Invisible.
The Invisible War.
Invisible War.
The Invisible War. And pursuant to that, then Secretary of Defense put out a memo regarding how we were going to handle sexual assault in the military, because Congress was contemplating taking that prosecutional jurisdiction away from the Army. And in the the countless of cases that I've handled, I've noticed that when the reporting victim was Black versus when the reporting victim was white, the reporting Black victims seem to have more credibility issues. They focus on, well, she's done this also or that or whatever the case is. Whereas where it was a white victim, this person had none or very little credibility issues, and because of that, the command was more inclined to go forward with prosecuting for sexual assault in those instances.
Justice Moore, I see that we're reaching the final minutes of the discussion. I didn't know if there were any final thoughts that you or the panelists wanted to share.
Well, why don't I just ask the panel if there's anything else that they would like the audience to know about their experiences as an African American in the military?
Just a quick one. So, and this was also a question that was raised in the chat. The military is a reflection of our society. So even though we wear the uniform, we have a certain standard, we have a certain code, if you will, the underlying issues that pervade our society just don't go away when you put on the uniform. We may have a different way of how we deal with it and address it, but those issues are still there. So, our world isn't too much different from the civilian world in that respect. It's just that for a lot of us who, have some sort of rank or have progressed and been promoted, we now have a platform and can command a certain type of audience, or we can have the ear of a particular leader that is able to effectuate at least change at a maybe battalion or brigade level.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just add that echoing Major Carter's comments, being an African American is just that. It's not a military member. I mean, you are African American when you leave base, and you deal with those issues out in the communities in which you live. Sometimes not by your choice, because you were forced to live out in the community in which you worked. So therefore, understanding that these issues do translate and do a lot of times, kind of filter into the communities in which they then become victimized twice, so to speak. You're dealing with the community at large who don't see you in the uniform, or even if you do have something that identifies you, that you are looked at or dealt with differently. So I think that's definitely something important that I wanted to just share. It's systemic, and you don't escape it.
Anyone else?
I want to comment about promotions in the military, and I want to say that I think perhaps the time has come for the military to figure out a better way to promote people, and to somehow eliminate race as well as person and sex in the process, and that there ought to be, in my opinion, quotas. If the military has 8% of its population African American, then the officers should be in the same numbers, if not greater, in my opinion. And perhaps that could be a way of alleviating some of the issues with regards to racism in the ranks and promotion.
Yes, Jim.
I want to read, first off, this is a very important, and I would hope that we can continue it at some time in the future. Let me read a poem for you from Ivan Houston, who was in the 92nd Infantry in Italy that liberated Lucca. Go to Florence if you will, see the crosses up on the hill. Notice the murals on the wall, buffaloes and arrows represent us all. Walk the green grass, crosses row by row, young black men killed attacking the foe. If it is God, if it is good, God who looks upon this field, believe men who fought and would not yield. Jim Crow was there, blocking their way, causing them to grief day after day. These men fought evil that enveloped the land. They battled for freedom with one tied hand.
Thank you very much for that. On that, I think, Terrence, we're ready to, and Adrianette, I think we're ready to end.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this program. I want to thank our amazing Justice Moore for doing an incredible job moderating and doing tremendous research and putting all this together. I want to thank each one of the panelists for taking time out of their day to be with us. Some of them from international locations. Thank you, Chloe, and many from the East Coast. And we look forward to continuing to celebrate your service. Before you log off, I want to take one more group picture just to make sure we have a good picture of everybody. So if everybody on the count of 3 can smile for the camera, I'm gonna get your picture.
Oh God, Terrence.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Awesome.
Got it.
Great picture. Thanks again, everybody. Justice Moore, did you have any final thoughts before we end this evening?
Thank everybody. The panelists, you were just wonderful. And yes. Did you want to say something, Ms. Woods? No. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe.